The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media is strictly prohibited.
Welcome back to the Nova Society. I'm Linda Gates, and I'll be filling in while Brooklyn is away and Scott is on vacation. They should both be back on Monday. I am joined by one of your Nova Society regulars, Dr. Mark Bound. Today, we will be answering a listener email from Nancy, who lives in Portland, Oregon. Nancy asks, Trump just signed an executive order essentially dismantling the Department of Education. I'm one of those former students still paying down student loans. What might this mean for those student loans, and what does it mean for schools around the country without the federal Department of Education?
Well, I will say this. That's a very good question. It's going to affect a lot of people in this country because there's a whole bunch of people that have federal student loans. And, right now we really don't know what's going to happen. Trump cannot totally dismantle or get rid of the federal Department of Education. That was created by law, and he cannot just unilaterally make it go away. So that's number one. Now, can his new appointee to run the Department of Education water that department down? Absolutely. What would that mean for student loans? That is one of those questions up in the air because somebody's going to have to take over for it. If the Department of Education is not going to be the one managing those student loans, another department, or they could privatize. Not really sure which one would be worse. There's been talk that maybe the Treasury Department would take over the student loans. We don't know what that might mean. All those programs, such as the income-driven program for students, that might all go away. We're not saying that it is, but it is very possible. And that's something that we have to keep an eye on. This is one of those cases where, for those people, if you're a constituent and you're paying student loans, and I don't care whether you're in a red state, a red district, or a blue state, blue district, you've got to make sure that your Congress people are standing up for you and for your interests. Congress does control the purse strings. These loans were not created by some executive order. These loans were created by law, and the Congress, who makes the laws and controls those purse strings, are the ones that have to stand up against the administration and say, wait a minute, you can't do this. You can make changes. We can't stop that, but we can stop the total dismantling and getting rid of the Department of Education. And the second thing I could say about it is the Department of Education helps a lot of school districts and helps a lot of states. And disproportionately, they help red states more than they do blue states. This is an attempt, basically, to dumb down the populace of the United States. And there's only one reason that you want to do that. It is easier to control a populace that is dumbed down. And think of it in this way. Make America great again. If we can't compete with other countries on the education level, and even today, if we look at the statistics of where the United States falls as far as math, the STEM sciences, we're far behind a lot of other countries that you wouldn't expect. So we're already losing ground. Getting rid of the Department of Education only makes us lose ground even more. And that is not making America great again. That is basically making us third world.
Well, I can understand everything that you're saying, and I do, to a point, agree with most of it. However, I am going to say a few things. Yep, most of it. Here's the bottom line. You and I have been around and in the school system since the 1960s. The school system and our education system since then has been dumbed down. Changes have been needed to be made for a very, very long time. Are we going in the right direction? I don't know. I do know that the education system is not the way it's portrayed to be, and our students are not getting the education they need, and our educators are not getting the recognition or the pay that they need. I don't know what this is going to mean for our student loans or for the future in general, but I do know that maybe, just maybe, Trump has a little bit of a point here, and that, yeah, our education system needs to change, and it needs to change drastically. I don't have the answers as to how that would be, though.
Yeah, but I mean, all right. So I can understand that point, but dismantling the Department of Education, make changes, absolutely. And yes, when you're looking at, the times that, say, you and I went to school back in the 60s and the 70s and whatever, yeah, we were still based upon a Horace Mann type of foundation as to how education was taught. It was basically memorization. That probably maybe has some value in certain areas, but this discussion has been had before. In high school, nobody ever taught anybody how to use a checkbook. Nobody taught anybody about, if you've got a credit card, you actually have to pay the thing back. Nobody ever taught critical and analytical thinking in the school systems, the primary school system. It was never done. That needs to change. But if we allow it by state, the state education departments to make the changes that they feel, you're going to have states such as, say, I don't know, Mississippi going against, say, California. And guess who's going to be the one at the advantage? California.
We already have that now.
Well, I understand that we already have that now. And a lot of that comes down to the importance that's being placed on education by the people. So those parents have to place a very high priority on education. I don't think they are. I don't think they're placing it as maybe our parents did. Remember, when in my generation, if you had a high school diploma, you were doing pretty good. You could get a pretty good job. If you had an associate's degree, you got even a better job, and a bachelor's degree. Hey, you got the management jobs.
Yeah.
But if you had a master's or a doctorate, that was like, wow. I mean,
yeah.
The world was open to you. We have moved into a condition today where businesses are requiring more education. That has forced people to get more bachelor's degree. At one point in time, if you had a bachelor's degree, let's say when I was in high school, if you had a bachelor's degree, you were the top 18% of educated people in the country. Today, you're in the top 32%.
Which still doesn't make any difference.
If you had a master's degree back when I was in high school, you were in the top 8% of the educated people. Today, you're in the top 16. Yeah. If you had a doctorate, you were in the top 0.8%, not 8%, but 0.8% of the educated people in the United States. Today, you're in the top 2%.
Yeah.
So, the education level has increased, but what we're teaching doesn't. And we treat everybody as exactly the same. And that is exactly what we can't do. This is where the federal Department of Education could be an amazing driving force to changing our perceptions of education today, where we're starting to say, all right, these are the skills. These are what you need. And we can take an awful lot from other countries. No matter how much we think we do everything so much better, the fact is that that's not the case. And that's shown by test scores. That's shown by test scores of high school age students. We can do better. And it would require the federal Department of Education to create the standard that the states would have to live by. And that would mean that Alabama, you would be on par with California and New York and some of these other places. You would be on par with them. And I'm not picking on Alabama or Mississippi, but they do have lower scores. And the fact is that if we change the model, get out of the Horace Mann old way of doing things from back in the 19th century and move to a model that acknowledges this is the 21st century. There are different skills that are required, and there's different things that really do work. That ABCs are really good. Writing in cursive is absolutely wonderful. But is writing in cursive, is that necessary today as it was?
No, absolutely not.
Because we have keyboards. I don't know how many people actually like write on a piece of paper anymore. I don't know any of my colleagues that when they write a paper, when they write an article for a journal, myself included, that actually writes it down. For one, I don't even type it. I dictate.
Yeah, that's right.
I dictate because I can fat finger a keyboard better than anybody on the face of the earth. So this is what this means. This was an opportunity.
Well, this is an opportunity.
It's a huge opportunity. Yeah. It could be. But I will say this. I blame Obama for some of this. Obama's attitude, I'm going to go back. I'm going to blame old Brock on this one. His comment is that everybody goes to college, everybody makes out better.
That's because back in 2008, that was the mentality in our country.
But he put a lot of people by promoting that. It's okay to promote that. He's right. But he put a lot of people in almost crippling debt.
Okay. You can't blame one man or that administration for putting everybody in crippling debt for going to college. That's kind of ridiculous. I get your point in this, but that isn't the case. That's not the case. You and I have actually had these discussions in the past, in that one person can't make the control or change it. They can't. However, the fact is that everything run in the United States is run like a business. These education systems, these colleges, these loan agencies, they're pretty much able to do what they want. There is no oversight on this, where there's a control, where it's uniformed across the board. It isn't. So a lot of changes do need to be made. But let's get back to the point here that Nancy had, that I think we've kind of lost sight of a little bit, and that is what might this mean for the Department of Education, for our schools, if we lose the Department of Education? Well, the reality is that it truly does take an act of Congress for this to happen, and it's going to take, 60 people have to vote. That means that some of the Democrats, I think 6 or 7, have to vote for this. What's the likelihood that this is really going to happen?
Well, you're talking about the Senate, and you're talking about, it probably won't happen. But one of the things that Linda McMahon said, and let's remember, Linda McMahon has no real background in education. Linda McMahon ran the WWE, sort of like being, the star of The Apprentice, all totally fake. But just I don't know the woman. Maybe she's good at that. I don't know. But her attitude and the attitude of the administration is, kick it back to the states. This is very much a state-centric administration. This is the type of administration that some of the early founding fathers who were against federalism would have loved. Kick it back to the states. The only problem is that we have 50 states, and to think that the 50 states are going to handle this exactly the same and be on par is ridiculous. It's just a sort of, when you go back to the early 20th century, there were those states that were industrial. Those industrial states did place a higher value on education because it was required. They needed engineers,
right?
But then the agrarian states, South Carolina for one, which was agrarian, they didn't place as much on education because they placed a lot on experience working the farm. And it is very possible that we could go back to that corporations won't move into a place like Nebraska because it's more agrarian, and they need people who are educated. And that's one of the things the states have to think about. South Carolina is a very good example. South Carolina has always been agrarian. We are now moving toward more industrial. We have some major industries coming into South Carolina, and we have some great universities here. And the education system, when I first moved to South Carolina 30 years ago, I think that we were ranked, and I'm just going to take a shot at this, we were ranked like 48th. Today, we're ranked far higher. And today, South Carolina, the community college system is ranked 4th in the nation. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, and we've got Clemson. We've got for all those Carolina fans, I'm sorry. We have Clemson. We have Carolina. So for all those Clemson fans, I'm sorry. We have places like the College of Charleston. We have Winthrop. We have Furman. We have Presbyterian College. We have Wofford. We have these amazing. The town I live in, which is Spartanburg. There's 6 universities within a stone's throw of us. We are basically a university town. And the fact is that that's a great thing. There's a lot of people who come here to the Spartanburg, Greenville, Spartanburg area because of that, because they're going to get, and when they come to school, and many times they stay. And that's a good thing. And that has allowed South Carolina to move toward a more industrial footing, which again is a good thing. But we require a strong federal Department of Education, not doing what it's always done, absolutely not doing what it's always done, but a totally revamped Department of Education to be able to guide the homogeny of what education should be in the United States. Do not leave it up to the states, because they're just going to basically go onto their own priorities. They're going to look at their own funding. And let's face it, again, same thing. The Department of Education, the federal Department of Education, funds a lot of things for schools, in the states. The state will have to now have to take the burden. So you can say that, well, that's saving money. Well, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Because you may save money federally, but the cost to your state is going to go up. And if that happens, how many politicians in the state are going to be willing to commit to better education and funding better education when they know now it's all on them? And I bet you're not going to find too many, and that's going to be the biggest problem. It's a sad thing. Again, to Nancy, he can't just arbitrarily get rid of the Department of Education. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Probably.
I do have something I want to add with this, not add to, but actually ask another question with this that Nancy actually touched on. And the reality is, let's say changes are made to the Department of Education through the Trump administration. Can he or they or whatever, is it possible that they can say, okay, well, all these students who owe all these student loans have X amount of time to pay up? Or like, is there anything that can be done if people just can't afford to make these payments? If they decide to say, hey, everybody has to pay up now, what happens?
Well, all right. So that brings in a legal question. When you signed up for a student loan, you basically signed a contract with the loan provider. Now the question comes down to, can the loan provider, after the fact, change the conditions of that loan and say, okay, I give you 30 days to pay up?
Yeah.
I think they would have a very hard time getting that through any kind of court system, because again, they signed up for this as well.
Okay. That makes sense.
They signed up for it. Now, could they change, the rules as to default? Yes. Could they change the rules and say there won't be any more income-driven repayment plans? Yes, probably they could. But again, this stuff will all go through the courts, because people always look at it that the borrower is the one that is, basically contracting with the loaner. And the fact is that it goes both ways. And they signed up for this as well. They signed up at a certain interest rate. They signed up at a payment agreement. Now, could all these special payment agreements go away? Probably so. But again, that would be something for the court system to look at when and if it happens. They're basically kicking the can, and it's, again, smoke and mirrors. We're telling you, we're saying, look, we're getting rid of the Department of Education. Department of Education costs X number of billions of dollars. We've gotten rid of that. Gee, we saved $8 billion. But they've moved that $8 billion someplace else. It didn't just go away. If they move taking care of the loans to the Department of Treasury is going to have to get some more people in there. If they move it to the states and they say, hey, the state, you're going to take care of all this. All that cost is now moved from the federal government to the state government. So yeah, maybe your federal government taxes may go down a little bit, but your state taxes are going to go up quite a bit because somebody's got to pay it. The system exists unless we decide that we're not going to have education in the United States. So that would be my answer to that.
Well, okay. That gives us a little hope.
I hate giving a little hope because it never works out. First of all, anybody that listens to this knows that Scott and I are the worst of predicting things. So again, we've actually taken on a new attitude of, well, let's wait and see what the courts have to say about this. We try not to predict, although Scott did make a prediction last week for something, and I don't think that's going to come true either. We'll see what happens. But I mean,
I have a new recommendation for a new episode for the Nova Society.
Uh-oh.
I feel like it would be very beneficial for everybody concerned that once a month you and Scott and Brooklyn have to do a bloopers reel for the month.
No. Our bloopers are really bad.
I know.
First, our bloopers are horrible.
But not
they
that
really
type
are
of
bad.
bloopers. Not that time of bloopers. Really your all the predictions, and then like once a month you have to go back and then you have to show where you were right or wrong. And why.
If this was season number 2 and 3, when we started making those predictions, that would be easy. However, we don't do it very often now. We try to stay away from it.
Because you've been
and I don't think any one of us
much.
wants to go back and listen to all of season 2 and 3 to try to find all those predictions that we made. Because, I mean, let's face it, we made the prediction that Kamala Harris was probably going to win the presidency. Yeah, that worked out for everybody. We actually went through all the states that were swing states, and we got we got every one of them wrong, which was amazing. So, again, I always say my degree is not in fortune telling.
True.
And I probably ought to stay in my own lane and not do predictions. I'm not even going to say. Matter of fact, it's like the kiss of death here at the Nova Society. If we predict something that's going to happen, you can almost guarantee. That's why neither Scott or I are predicting the Mets will win the World Series. Because if we do, that's the kiss of death. I mean, they probably wouldn't even make the playoffs if we did that.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's episode. We both thank you for joining us. Brooklyn and Scott should be back next week. Have a great weekend, and we hope to see you again on the Nova Society.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or a comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. JCIS is a publication of Nova Works, a scholarly repository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description.